annual games, DLC. From now on, whatever y'all decide to do, just don't do this to my boy again. We should not have had to wait to get Shanks as DLC. Y'all made me wait way too long. Do something like this again, and I'm ringing some necks up at Game Freak. No, don't play that game with me. I'll kill you. I'll do it.
Everybody like, hey, are you ready to go? Ready to go? Everybody like, hey.
Alright, what is up y'all? Soul here and welcome back to my story mode. As per usual, y'all already know how it's going down. I got a few things on my mind that I need to say, but I will leave all the timestamps right down there for you so you can go ahead and skip on to the main video. For starters, this is something that I had in mind to talk about way before we got announcements for the new games that are coming out later this year and early next year. However, now I'm really glad that I held off because now this topic is more relevant than ever. Last year was the first time that I can recall that we ever got DLC in place of an annual Pokemon game. Sure, there was definitely a point in time where we would go a full year without anything Pokemon related. However, Game Freak, Nintendo, and the Pokemon Company have definitely recognized their very active fanbase and want to make sure that their content feeds them at least a little bit every year. Technology has come a very long way since the 90s, and they have 100% capitalized on that. Which, when you really think too deep about it, can also be part of the problem, but that's a topic for another day. But anyway, because of their constant put out, we've grown accustomed to expecting new games every single year, which is precisely why getting DLC for a mainline game instead of a new game at the end of the year was very weird for us. I remember saying out loud that I felt that Pokemon had been dry recently, and somebody immediately corrected me. They said, "Bro, we literally just got DLC a couple of months ago." And you know what? They're absolutely right. At this point in time, when you really think about it, it hasn't even been half a year since we got the Crown Tundra DLC. So I thought about it, and I was like, wow, is that really where my mindset was at? Despite what y'all think of me, I personally consider myself a pretty patient person for the most part. I can definitely act impatient, sure, but at the end of the day, I definitely prefer quality over quantity. Which is why I can confidently say that even if they didn't put out a Pokemon game for almost 2 full years or something like that, I'd like to think that I'd be totally fine. That's a big boy company right there, so usually they'll provide anyway, so I'm usually good with any kind of Pokemon content during the year. I'm definitely especially more than okay when they put out spin-offs or something similar in that realm to hold us over while the bigger project is being worked on. And I'm also going to be accepting of the fact that not everything that they put out is going to appeal to me, and that is perfectly fine. I know that we've talked about it a lot, but Pokemon Snap is actually a perfect example. Pokemon Snap is something that I personally do not plan on picking up. I'm not just going to sit here and call the year of Pokemon dry right now because there's a game that they're putting out that I don't care about. There's going to be a lot of work with love and care put into that game that's going to appeal to a lot of other people, and you know what? I absolutely respect that. I hope everybody that picks that game up has an amazing time. I have to consider things from other people's perspectives too, just like when Pokemon Mystery Dungeon came out. I was super excited for it, doesn't mean everybody else was. The point of my little ramble here is that the distance between the DLC and a new Pokemon game, whether it's something that appeals to you or not, was not really that far. Our expectations just tend to be a little too high sometimes. And that's exactly why I think this is a very important discussion. Whether you got the DLC or not, we all have to consider the fact that because it happened in a mainline game, this is a part of Pokemon's future now, whether we like it or not. Just like any other game series you may know and like, DLC is what's going to put the distance between the previous game and the newest game in the series. And because of that, I think it's only fair that we discuss what's preferable. And that right there is where the main topic comes in. Is receiving DLC better or worse than receiving annual games from Pokemon? We're gonna tackle this in the usual fashion. There's a good and bad to receiving DLC, and there's a good and bad to receiving annual Pokemon games. We're gonna look at this from every angle and see what kind of conclusion we come to. First, we're gonna look over the goods and bads of receiving DLC. Let's start off on a high note and talk about the good side of things first. Let's start with the obvious, the fact that DLC allows the world that we've received to be expanded upon more. When receiving brand new games that we enjoy, there's always a part of us that wants to explore more of that game, more story about the characters, more general history about the world itself, things like that. There may be a lot of information and different storylines that may not have been implemented in the main story. The beauty of DLC is that it allows the opportunity for a lot of what I just mentioned to be expanded upon. For example, with the first DLC that we received, the Isle of Armor, we got to know exactly where Leon got his power from. I don't know how recently y'all fought against Leon, but the difference between him and literally everybody else is actually kinda crazy. So going to the Isle of Armor and meeting Master Mustard kinda explains exactly why that is. We somewhat kind of got an idea of what kind of training the champion himself went through, and that I feel was kinda interesting. And as a little bonus, we got to learn about a sick new Pokemon, Urshifu, as well as 2 new characters entirely to interact with, Clara and Avery. 2 characters that actually got their own spotlights a little bit because they weren't shoved into the main game. Now, while they may not be the craziest Pokemon characters we've ever met, sure enough, I was glad to have a little bit of a rivalry going on between us while going through the story of the Isle of Armor. And then just generally from a gameplay aspect, it was super nice and refreshing to have an entirely new wild area explorable for us. Before that point, we'd spent the better part of half a year exploring the regular wild area. And yes, while it is nice to have something new to Pokemon like that, it did get a little tedious to have the one place to explore for that long. Yeah, I'm sure that you do have a lot of time spent in Sword and Shield, but how much of that time was spent exploring routes and stuff like that? Yeah, no, it was in the wild area. Don't sit there and lie to me. The introduction to new characters and lore, the return of many different Pokemon that we all know and love, and the satisfaction of having a brand new area to explore for hours on end came together to become a pretty satisfying DLC if you ask me. And I feel the exact same way about the Crown Tundra. We got to know characters like Peony and his daughter, we got to know a little bit about the history of Calyrex in that area, and to top that off, not only did we get another wild area to explore, but we also got a game mode that we'd be spending even more time on. After learning about the beauty that is Dynamax adventuring, I spent a solid 2 to 3 weeks on that sucker. And you know what, this is completely off topic, but getting a shiny was phenomenal incentive to come back. Boy, if you don't get up out of my way. Go, God. Whoa, 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 what the f***? What the f***? What the f***? That's a shiny Suicune? Yeah, that had nothing to do with the topic at hand, but I wanted to show that off. That was a very fun time. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is that it's very nice to have incentive to come back to a game that you enjoyed but feel like you didn't get enough out of. And DLC can provide the opportunity to bring life back to a game that definitely deserves it. But then again, which kind of game deserves it is definitely up to each individual, so I'm not even going to try to argue that. Anyhow, another one of the big upsides to getting DLC for the previous game is that it allows for more time to be put in towards the next set of games. Now, as far as Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl go, since they already have another team working on that one isn't really what I'm talking about. But for Pokemon Legends, you already know that they had concepts and things like that ready to go as soon as Pokemon Sword and Shield hit any kind of store shelves. Hell, you know what? There's a possibility that that might have started even way before that. With teams like the Pokemon Company and Game Freak, you know for a fact that they're already considering the next game to come afterwards before they're even finished with the one that they're working on. Considering that we got a reveal for Pokemon Legends leads me to believe that the development for Pokemon Legends was happening at around the same time as the development for the DLC. So, assuming that they were smart about it, that means that a smaller part of the team was working on the DLC, while the majority of the staff was working on putting love and care towards this big new game, Pokemon Legends. When you really look at it, this is a brand new concept for Pokemon, so they definitely needed a little more time to put something like that together. Hence why Game Freak isn't even the ones working on the remakes for Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. And now that the DLC is completely finished, I can only assume that now all hands are on deck for the new game, and they're going to spend the rest of this year putting it together to make it look nice and pretty for us by the time that it comes out around early 2022. And you know what? I can absolutely appreciate that. At the very least, this game is getting a lot more time and care than a lot of other previous Pokemon games that we've known so far. And you know what? More time spent on development has never been a bad thing, and I hope they take as much time as they need for this one. But with that kind of does it for my upsides to DLC. Now let's go ahead and talk about the downsides of having DLC instead of annual games. For one thing, they will have and will most likely use the excuse for unfinished mechanics and missing Pokemon. The legendary Pokemon cut was a big deal back when the game first came out. They made the promises that the game was going to look and feel a hell of a lot better because cutting Pokemon gave them the time they needed to do that. And a lot of people can definitely agree that they didn't exactly deliver on that promise. Obtaining the DLC gave us at least 200 or so Pokemon that people felt that we should have had at the beginning of the game. And looking back at it here, I'm going to be honest with you, I thought about the concept of Dynamax Adventures and things like that, and kind of wondered why that was placed in so late. Frankly, that's not that crazy of a mechanic, and it definitely did build on the DLC itself. But really looking at it, that's not all that crazy of a mechanic that should have been held off till the end of the game. Long and short of it is, a lot of that was put behind a paywall, and I'm sure that a lot of people definitely felt like that was unfair. But we live in the era of DLC now, which means that companies could get their bigger games out a lot sooner and worry about updates and bigger additions to the game later on. Which means that important things can be hidden behind paywalls for years to come. It's kind of BS, but honestly, that's the truth of it. Now this actually brings me into my next point, which is the fact that there's no guarantee that the DLC we receive will be worth the price we're paying for it. Now me personally, I'm not exactly upset with what we got from the DLC. However, when you look at the grand scheme of things, we paid about half the price of the original game for about little less than half the content. For example, the main game of Pokemon Sword and Shield is slated to have around 25 to 30 or so hours of content available for you. And of course, when I say that, I mean that for the average player. Now looking at the DLC, the Isle of Armor is slated to have 3 to 4 hours of content, and the Crown Tundra is slated to have about 4 to 5 hours of content. So looking at the grand scheme of things, while you could take about 2 to 3 days to finish Sword and Shield if you're playing consistently, it'll take you about less than half that to finish the DLC, probably in a day if you're super consistent. Okay, so obviously my math is not incredible, but you see what I'm getting at here, right? To kind of reiterate what I said, we're paying about half the price of the original with just barely half the amount of content. It's a little bit of a stretch, and people that barely like Sword and Shield probably didn't even feel like that was worth it. And to top that off, the craziest thing about this is, they had us paying for the DLC before we even knew what we were getting. Sure, a majority of us had a general idea, but that's not a lot to go on. They'd give us small clips and sneak peeks here and there, but really we didn't know exactly what we were getting into, and usually trailers tend to give off more than what's actually being received inside the content itself. Not to say that it was false advertisement per se, but it was definitely hyped up a little more than it probably should have been. And then to top that off, probably the worst part about the DLC is the fact that you can't even get the Crown Tundra and the Isle of Armor separately. You have to buy them together or not at all. A lot of people were saying that the Crown Tundra made the experience overall for Pokemon Sword and Shield a hell of a lot better, and I'm sure that a lot of people that didn't get the DLC at that point were definitely intrigued. However, for them, they were forced to go through a paywall and they had to get Isle of Armor as well as the Crown Tundra. There was no one or the other, you did not have an option. And you know Nintendo, discounts are not a thing. So to this day, anybody that wants Pokemon or the DLC is still paying full price for it. And I think that's just kinda oof, you know what I mean? Moving along here, my final point is actually the fact that their attention could end up being split between creating the DLCs and creating the mainline games. Like I said earlier, I have no doubt in my mind that they had a good quarter to half of the staff working on the DLC, while the other half was working on Pokemon Legends. And when you really look at it, that could be kind of a dangerous thing. I have no doubt in my mind that because half of the team was working on something else, by the time they got back to start working on Pokemon Legends with the other half, there's a lot of concepts and things that clearly don't work that they might have to overlook because they simply don't have enough time to fix them right now. Game developers do have timers over their heads, and unfortunately that timer could be detrimental to the development of a video game. So honestly, I can't really imagine anything worse than working on a different project, coming in to help with a brand new project, and then being told that I have to haul ass because that timer is cut in half for me. And unfortunately, the Pokemon Company is definitely never one to shy away from splitting their attention on games. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but Pokemon Let's Go and Sword and Shield were in development at the same time. Now looking at it, there's a lot of things that were better about Let's Go, and there was a lot of things that were better about Sword and Shield. Imagine if the efforts of all of those developers that worked on those two separate games came together to make something even bigger. But no, they unfortunately separated all of that brainpower and talent because they needed more games. So long and short of it is, while DLC is definitely on a much smaller scale than a whole new game, it could still very much pose a problem in the grand scheme of things at the end of the day. But hey, we will never truly know who worked on what and for how long. Fact of the matter is, we only know about the struggles that they tell us about. So really, all we can do is gauge how good and bad the efforts were based on the games that we receive. And overall, we just won't know until we receive them. So that right there just about covers all of the upsides and the downsides to receiving DLC as opposed to annual games. So why don't we go ahead and flip that pancake over and take a look as to why there's an upside as well as a downside to receiving annual games. Let's start with the upsides. For starters, it's always fun to get a new big game, whether it be a brand new one or a sequel or some kind of remake. One way or another, we always have a big new world to explore, and it's always nice and refreshing. Whether or not that world is completely brand new or a completely revamped version of a world we already knew kinda depends on the year. But whatever the case may be, a new experience is always super refreshing after a long period of waiting. Which for Pokemon fans is only a couple of months, which I kinda find funny to be honest with you, but anyway. It gives everybody a chance to sink their teeth into something for a while. Also, with recent Pokemon games, we always usually get some kind of gimmick that we get to play around with for a while and get to understand better. Some may agree that the gimmicks are good, some may agree that the gimmicks are bad, but we can all come to the same conclusion. It does at least bring something kind of new to the table. Even I have to admit, when seeing those first couple of trailers for Pokemon Sword and Shield, Dynamax Pokemon looked pretty exciting at the time. Next to the obviously new story and world, that was the thing that I was looking forward to the most. What I'm getting at here is the fact that it's always nice to have something to look forward to with Pokemon. We know how they operate now, or at least we have a general idea, so we always get to look forward to a brand new game with something new to it that we hadn't experienced before in previous Pokemon games. Again, making the games annual definitely raised our expectations a little bit, but it was nice to always have that comfort knowing that something for Pokemon was coming, which is kind of a good thing for both sides when you really look at it. Some of us may be under the impression that this game just simply didn't hit. Hey, they can always get them next time. We're always going to have another Pokemon game to look forward to, so maybe that one will be better. We'll see what happens. On the company's end, they have about a year or so to figure out what went wrong with the previous games and then touch up upon that and make it a lot better in the games coming afterwards. So it's always at least nice to look at the previous game and be like, okay, well it didn't work here, maybe there's some ways that they could fix it and touch up on it in the next game. That way it could be a lot better and we can enjoy it a lot more as a mechanic. So that right there is definitely at least one way to look at it. My other point is that because Pokemon has come so far with so many different types of games, it's always fun to speculate which kind of game we're gonna get next. Is it gonna be a remake? Is it gonna be a sequel? Are we gonna go right into the next generation of Pokemon? We never know. But one thing's for certain, surprises are nice, and it's always nice and fun to have the build up to that surprise. Or maybe you absolutely despise surprises, I don't know, it really depends on who you ask. But anyhow, that just about does it for my upsides to receiving annual games. So finally, why don't we go ahead and tackle the other side and talk about what the downsides could possibly be for receiving annual games. For starters, it is unfortunately very easy for them to take advantage of the mindsets of fans and pretty much put out what they want. They know for a fact that they have a lot of fans considering that it's one of the most successful companies in the frickin' world. So they know for a fact that they could definitely put something out and people will definitely buy it. Unfortunately, that's how it works with a lot of things. For example, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. There's no way in hell that game didn't take more than a couple of months to edit. Not even develop, edit. If I wasn't a huge fan of Pokemon, somebody could have told me that Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon was just a mod of Sun and Moon, and I would have absolutely believed them. I know I poke at it a lot, but when you really look at it, that game didn't really change all that much from the originals. But hey, that was the new Pokemon game for the year, so everybody snagged it right up. See what I'm saying here? While it is quite the dangerous mindset to have, unfortunately there are people that don't even realize that they have that mindset. And unfortunately, they have capitalized on that mindset before, and there's no guarantee that they won't do it again. A lot of people, for instance, are under the impression that Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are a phenomenal example of that. And you know what? I can't necessarily blame them. Trust me, as a longtime Pokemon fan, while I am looking forward to the remakes, I can tell when my nostalgia's getting poked at. But you guys have already heard me talk about how I feel about the remakes, so we're gonna move on from that. Another one of my big downsides is that even with new technology, I feel like the expectations on the developers can be a little too much. When you really look at Pokemon Let's Go and Pokemon Sword and Shield, we do need to keep in mind that these are Pokemon's first Switch games. Like we said earlier, Pokemon Let's Go and Sword and Shield were in development around the same time. Obviously, Sword and Shield got a little more time than Let's Go did, but the extra time that they received couldn't have been more than a couple of months. We also kind of have to consider that at that point they were still working with new technology. The switch from Game Boy to DS probably wasn't really all that crazy, but the move from 3DS to Switch had to be a little bit of a hurdle. I'm no expert game developer, but I can't imagine that was a cakewalk. But this is a big company we're talking about. The higher ups said, okay, make this, you have this much time to make it happen. So looking at the past here and looking towards the future, I can't say I have a lot of faith that that mindset's gonna change very much. So if we were to continue receiving annual games like we were beforehand, I truly don't believe that those games would ever truly have enough time to cook properly. And you know, receiving games like that would probably make the overall quality decline in a much more rapid fashion. Trust me, there's a good reason as to why you haven't heard about your favorite game series in a couple of years. It's cause they're in the kitchen cooking them properly for y'all. Cause I'll be completely honest with you, I've noticed times where Pokemon has cooked the edges and left the middle nice and cold and said good enough. But I digress, whatever the case may be, that just about does it for all my thoughts on receiving annual Pokemon games. So, as far as my general overall thoughts go, personally, I think I have to say that I'm more than good with getting DLCs over annual games. While the expansion pass wasn't the greatest amount of DLC that I've ever seen in a video game, I will say for the most part that it did just add to the game. Rarely have I ever seen a situation where people will tell you that the DLC of a game made it worse. And thankfully, this is definitely not one of those times. And like I said earlier, getting this DLC only meant that they had a little more time to start working towards the bigger projects. And from what it looks like, Game Freak in of itself isn't splitting its attention between two different games. They took the smart route and had somebody else develop the remakes while they gave themselves a little more time and brain power to focus on the next main game. Whether or not it's going to end up effective, we'll have to see by the time we hit 2022, because it's too early to say. I'll say it like this, we are currently in the era of DLC. Publishers will definitely utilize DLC as an excuse to help get projects out earlier. And now that it's on home consoles, Pokemon is no exception to this. Whether or not this is a good or bad thing for Pokemon, kinda depends on who you ask. And if you're asking me, if you want my personal opinion, I gotta say I think that DLC is a lot better than getting annual games. More content, extra story, and more world building while the bigger and better is getting developed in the moment? Yeah, I can't really be mad about that one, Chief. But hey, that's just my personal opinion. So with that, I want to ask you guys what you think about the situation. Did you guys enjoy receiving DLC? Did you absolutely despise the DLC and don't want anything to do with it ever again? Or on the other hand, did you actually prefer getting annual games? Or are you okay with getting a little bit less in between? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Trust me when I say, I can see everything. But with that, I think that's going to go ahead and do it from me, so I'm going to go ahead and skedaddle on out of here. Thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Make sure to drop a like and a comment and subscribe for more content just like this and for the bigger and better that we got coming to this channel. I know you guys are going to want to stick around. But with that, I'm out. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!